I stood outside the red brick house on the outskirts of Albany, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles lost their color. Autumn in upstate New York had taken its colder turn, and gusts of wind sent dry leaves skittering across the yard. After 5 years of silence, I'd come back, not out of sentiment, but for a very different reason. Inside my worn leather bag lay my ceremonial dress uniform. The shoulder straps bore the silver insignia of a colonel, a rank that took nearly a decade to earn, while my family still believed I was just a mid-tier officer, barely making it in military life. Tomorrow, they'd sit in a room where I held real authority and wouldn't even realize it. If you've ever had to choose between family and honor, drop a comment, like this post, share it, and follow the channel. My name is Maya. I'm 31, a cybersecurity officer with Central Command, and the eldest daughter in a family that had always invested their hopes in my younger brother, never once asking what I really did beyond the vague label of military. The front door opened before I could knock. My mother, Linda, wore the same apple-printed apron and tilted her head as she looked at me. "Maya," she said in the same tone she'd used to call someone down for breakfast, not like someone greeting a daughter who had vanished for 5 years. "You're just in time. Daniel's on his way. He was just picked for the strategic finance team at Whitman Cole. His girlfriend says he'll be VP by next year." I nodded tightly, lips pressed into a thin line. "Come in," she added. Not a question, no hug, no warmth. Inside, the house looked exactly as I'd left it. The lavender painting still hung askew in the kitchen. The cream-colored tablecloth with burn marks still covered the table. I set my bag down on the couch, scanning the family photos. Almost all of them of Daniel. His high school graduation, finance conferences, group shots with junior execs. Nothing of me past college. Definitely nothing in uniform. Upstairs, my old bedroom was still technically mine, except the bookshelf was now full of Daniel's tennis trophies. My world maps and history notes had vanished, only faint tape residue remained. The room had been reabsorbed, like I'd been erased, efficiently, quietly. I unzipped my bag, pulled out the pressed uniform, and hung it up with care. Under the soft yellow glow, the polished insignia gleamed. The colonel's mark. Something I couldn't mention without hearing. Sounds important, but it's probably like any other management job, right? The doorbell rang downstairs. I didn't move at first, fingers brushing the silver insignia like a reminder. Then I exhaled and descended. The dining room lights were already on. Daniel was in full presentation mode, talking about integrating AI into financial risk management. He was confident, magnetic. My mother gazed at him like she was watching a TED Talk. My father, Frank, nodded absently while scrolling on his phone. "Daniel, tell your sister about the meeting with the new CEO," my mom said, between bites of grilled salmon. "Oh, right." He turned to me with a courteous smile. "Still in the military?" "Yeah." "Same position," I replied evenly, spearing a green bean. "Though there have been a few changes." My mom raised a brow. "Still getting posted everywhere? Must be hard to settle down." I opened my mouth, but she was already talking again, about Daniel's new apartment downtown, then asked if I'd brought dessert. I said no. My schedule hadn't allowed it. She shrugged, like that proved something. Near the end of dinner, while she fetched dessert, Dad chimed in. "Mr. Maxwell, WC's chairman, is visiting the Troy office tomorrow. The finance team's prepping like crazy. Daniel's leading the security integration. If he nails it, there might be a promotion." I set down my glass. "Didn't Whitman Cole just land a defense data contract with the Pentagon?" Dad nodded. "Probably a mid-level military rep, someone younger. If it were important, Daniel wouldn't be involved." I tilted my head, offering a faint smile. He might be right. Then again, tomorrow might surprise everyone. I didn't know then. That was just the beginning. The next morning, I woke at 5 a.m. in what used to be my room, though it no longer smelled like mine. A faint glow from the street lamp filtered through the faded beige curtains, casting a dull shadow of the uniform hanging behind the closet door. I sat up, feet landing on the thin rug, the same one from high school. Only now, my knees carried more scars, and my back didn't appreciate soft mattresses anymore. The coffee maker groaned as I started the brew. My mother, Linda, shuffled in wrapped in a towel, hair damp. "You're up early? Still on base hours?" I nodded and handed her a mug. She took it without looking at me. We sat in silence. The only sounds were the fridge's hum and the occasional clink of a spoon. "Daniel prefers lighter coffee," she said casually. "Says the strong kind upsets his stomach." I took a sip, letting the bitterness settle on my tongue. The house slowly came alive. My father, Frank, appeared in a crisp shirt and reached for toast. Somewhere Daniel was already on the phone, calm but charged, probably running through his pitch again. I finished breakfast quickly and headed upstairs to change. The uniform was already laid out, buttons aligned, insignia gleaming. I buckled the belt with practiced ease and fastened the silver watch gifted to me during my promotion. I met my own gaze in the mirror. Posture straight, shoulders square, eyes steady. Downstairs, I slipped a coat over the uniform. My mother looked up, her eyes pausing briefly on my nameplate. "Heading to work too?" I smiled softly. "Something like that." I left before anyone else. The main Whitman coal facility was less than 10 miles away, tucked into the northern tech corridor of Syracuse. When I arrived, the security gate opened. The guard checked my ID and stood up straighter. "Good morning, Colonel Stevens. They're expecting you. 5th floor, East Wing, conference room." I nodded and thanked him. The glass door slid open, and I stepped inside. Not as the daughter overlooked at the dinner table, but as the authorized officer overseeing a $900 million defense security contract. The elevator ride was quiet as breath. The 5th floor opened into a sleek space of steel and glass, hushed like a theater just before the curtain lifts. As I walked the hallway, a few heads turned, eyes widened. Some stood to greet me, others stared, unsure. But the air had shifted. I entered the meeting room 20 minutes early. The prep coordinator jumped up from the console. "We didn't know you'd be here in person. Do you need anything?" "No, everything's in order." I took the seat marked for the military representative, opened my laptop, and reviewed the agenda. From the hallway, the sound of footsteps and conversation signaled the others arriving. I heard Daniel's voice first, laughing, confident. Then the door opened. His eyes met mine, and he froze. Just for a second, before masking it with a polite smile. "You? What are you doing here?" I gave a small nod. "Work." He looked like he wanted to ask more, but then our father entered with a group of managers. His gaze flicked to my nameplate, then my shoulders, and then quickly shifted away. "This is, my daughter, Maya," he said, trying to sound casual. "Looks like she's part of the project." A woman with chestnut hair and a dark blazer stepped forward. I recognized her immediately. Rachel Monroe, the company's director of security. "Colonel Stevens, we weren't aware you'd be joining us today. It's an honor." The room instantly snapped into the professional atmosphere I was used to in high-level defense briefings. Only my father and brother hadn't quite adjusted. At 9 a.m. sharp, the meeting began. Rachel introduced each department and the project goals, then noted the special presence of the military rep, me, who would be reviewing security protocols and approving each phase of the technical integration. When I stood and launched the slides, I spoke clearly. Encryption standards, internal data shielding, layered access protocols. I noticed Daniel subtly hunching over, eyes glued to his screen. My father sat back, arms crossed, jaw tight. When I concluded, Rachel turned toward me. "Thank you, Colonel. Your analysis was incredibly sharp. We've heard a lot about your service record, but today made it clear why." I nodded calmly. "Thank you. This matters to both sides and to national security." I didn't look at my family once during the presentation, but I could feel their eyes. I knew from that moment on everything had shifted. But I didn't realize yet. That was only the opening act. The meeting wrapped just before noon. I let the others leave first. Outside, a few people approached to shake hands, exchange cards, polite, professional, but with the unmistakable eagerness of wanting to stay connected. Daniel had already disappeared, likely avoiding eye contact. My father lingered briefly, had a word with Rachel, then glanced in my direction. No invitation to lunch, no explanation. He left without saying a word. I hadn't expected more. I walked across the campus for a while before heading back to my car. The sky over Syracuse was blank. Not rainy, not sunny, just an endless gray, like someone had pulled a sheet over the sun. The wind slipped beneath my collar, and I zipped up my coat a little higher. On the way back, I stopped at a quiet cafe near Getty Street, ordered a latte, and tucked myself into a corner booth. I checked my phone. Nothing from my mother, father, or Daniel. Just one message from Olivia, my cousin. 10:43 a.m. Greg just texted me, he said. She walked into that meeting like a damn commander. Tell her I'm proud. Coffee soon? I smiled. Olivia always had a way of cutting through the noise. Simple, well-timed, never patronizing. She once drove 4 hours from Buffalo just to be there when I got promoted. Said she had to see that pinning thing you never shut up about. I typed back, definitely. Maybe this weekend, I'm around. When I got home, Daniel was already there, leaning against the kitchen counter, jacket off, glass of water in hand. When he saw me, he didn't speak. Just turned to the window as if admiring a tree no one in the family had ever cared about. I didn't know you were that person, he said quietly. I slipped off my shoes, set my bag on a chair, and replied softly, No one asked. He nodded slowly, still not looking at me. I think I made a fool of myself this morning. I walked over, opened the fridge, grabbed a cold bottle of water. A memory flashed. Daniel as a little boy, sitting beside me on the living room floor, eating cereal while I told stories about Chwaitwood sailors. Once he asked, Do you want to be a captain someday? And I'd nodded proudly. No one laughed at you, I said, keeping my tone neutral. But there are some changes you'll need to make to your proposal. The interface between your system and ours lacks safeguards against interception. My team will send over revised requirements this week. Daniel exhaled. It was the kind of response you'd expect from a military officer, measured, direct, and impersonal. I'm just doing my job, I added, as if I could hear his thoughts. He swirled the glass in his hand. Does Dad know? Know what? That you're at the level where you could shut the whole project down if you wanted to. I sat across from him, back straight, hands resting on my knees. Dad knew I was in the military, knew I worked in cybersecurity, but the rest? He never asked. Daniel nodded slowly, like swallowing ice that hadn't quite melted. I didn't realize you'd gotten that far, he murmured. I thought you were. Logistics, or admin, or something. Yeah, that's what everyone assumed, I said. Probably easier to imagine me coordinating satellite encryption protocols than see me for who I actually am. He let out a small laugh, then went quiet again. I stood first. I've got work back on base this afternoon. If Mom and Dad ask, tell them I'll be back tonight. Daniel turned, watching me go. You're not mad? I paused at the stairs. I'm more tired than mad. Back at base, the lights in the monitoring room were still on. I submitted the preliminary report on Whitman Coal's security infrastructure, then returned to my quarters. The wall lined with medals, citations, and campaign maps, things no one at home had ever seen, made me feel strangely grounded. Here, I didn't have to explain why I was in the room. No one asked why I didn't become a financial analyst or go corporate. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Your father says you're some kind of colonel now. Is that true? I didn't respond immediately. I just stared at the screen. No sadness, no anger, just nothing. I flipped the phone face down, stood, and hung my uniform back up. The clock neared 10. I lay down on the bed, one arm draped across my forehead. Tomorrow morning, I'd be back for the second round of evaluations. And this time, I didn't think they'd stay so quiet. I wasn't sure I was ready for dinner afterward, but I'd be there. Because if I didn't show up, they'd write another version of the story. And this time, I wanted to be the one telling it. The next morning's security review went more smoothly than I expected. The tech team at Whitman Cole was focused, responsive. No sideways glances, no hesitant tones like the day before. When I asked to review the vulnerability testing protocols again, they immediately escorted me to the internal server room, provided full access logs, backup encryption layers, and third-party audit reports. Everything was clean, precise, and transparent. Only one person remained silent the entire session, Daniel. He sat quietly in the corner, taking notes constantly, never meeting my eyes. When I pointed out a discrepancy between the simulation model and the actual system integration, he didn't argue. He just nodded, typed something into his tablet, and kept going. After the review, Rachel Monroe, the director of security, stepped into the hallway with me. "Thank you, Colonel," she said. "My team learned a lot from your feedback yesterday." I nodded. "This project matters. It's familiar, but we can't afford to let familiarity make us complacent." Rachel paused, studying me, then tilted her head slightly. "There's a dinner tonight with the regional leadership. If you'd prefer to skip it, I can reschedule." I smiled gently. "No need. I have a family dinner tonight, probably the harder one." She chuckled softly and didn't press further. By late afternoon, I was home before dark. My parents were in the kitchen. My mother stood at the stove, stirring a pot of beef stew. My father was uncorking a bottle of red wine. The kitchen smelled like rosemary and cinnamon. "You're back," my mother said, without turning around. "Hungry?" I slipped off my coat and hung it by the door. "I'm fine. We're having dinner here?" She nodded. "Your cousin Jenny is coming too. Her mom called. Said she wanted to see you." I paused. Jenny hadn't texted me. My father chimed in. "We should all have dinner together. Talk. It's been a while." And then I said nothing. Daniel walked in behind me, sweater on, hair slightly disheveled. He glanced around, then said the first words. "No drama tonight, right?" I smirked. "I'm just a guest." Dinner began in near silence for the first 10 minutes. The sound of cutlery on plates, wine glasses clinking, chairs shifting on the wooden floor. My dad made small talk about the weather at Fort Ralston, where I was currently stationed. My mom mentioned an old family acquaintance who was in the military or something. Jenny talked about her daughter starting first grade, then leaned toward me and whispered, "Do you remember that camping trip we took to Lake Ontario? You brought that Morse code book?" I chuckled. The memory hit instantly, me at 15, obsessed with signal patterns like they held the keys to the universe. Jenny just wanted to play water balloon tag. "Yeah," I said. "I thought I was going to be a spy back then." She laughed softly, her eyes flicking toward my dad. "Well, I guess you're kind of close now." I was about to respond when my mother set down her wine glass and said quietly, "I heard you led the entire meeting yesterday." I nodded. My role was to represent the military. They needed someone who understood both security and tech. My father cleared his throat like he was reading from a prepared script. "We didn't know you'd reach that level. You should have told us." I set my fork down. I tried, I called, I sent updates, even forwarded newsletters. No one replied. "It's not that," my mom cut in quickly. "It's not that we didn't care. It's just... it all felt so far from what life is like around here." I didn't answer. Daniel took a sip of wine, then quietly set down his glass. "Yesterday," he said, "you looked different, like you didn't have to explain anything. Everyone looked at you like they had to listen." I looked at him. "I'm still here." He hesitated, then answered softly, "Here. No one's ever seen you like that." Jenny stayed quiet, her eyes down. My mother reached for the water pitcher, her hand trembling slightly. My father cleared his throat again. "You know, Maya, he said slowly. We were raised with a certain kind of logic. When something doesn't look familiar, our first instinct is to question it. I leaned back in my chair. The strange part isn't that I joined the military, I said. It's that this family chose not to see it. No one responded. Outside, the wind whispered through the bare branches, like the house itself was listening. When dinner ended, Jenny grabbed her coat and came over to me. I never stopped following your path, she said. I don't understand all of it, but I'm proud of you. You should know that. I gently squeezed her hand. I do. Thank you. I stood, ready to step away from the table. But my dad spoke again, his voice lower now. Tomorrow, your mom wants to ask you something. I paused. What kind of something? He shook his head. You'll see in the morning. I walked upstairs, unsettled again. Something was waiting. Not just in what had been left unsaid, but in what was about to be. The next morning, my mom knocked just as I was zipping my uniform into my duffel. She didn't wait for an invitation, just stepped into the room holding a steaming mug of tea and placed it on the desk like she was clearing breakfast dishes. You're leaving already? I nodded, still adjusting the strap on my bag. Back to base? Another nod. She sat in the chair by the window, her back hunched slightly. She stared outside like she expected the trees to speak for me. I couldn't sleep last night, she said after a moment. I kept thinking about the work you do, about the things I said before. I didn't reply. Outside, the neighbor's milk truck rumbled over the gravel. The room smelled like chamomile and worn cotton. I remember when you won first place in the Vermont State Science Fair. The paper ran your picture, and your father and I. We only said one thing. Good. But don't get overconfident. My grip tightened slightly on the strap. I thought, if we didn't push you down the right road, you'd lose your way. She turned to me. Her eyes weren't watery, but they didn't flinch. I used to think the military was where people ended up when they had no other options. I gave a faint, tired smile. Not sarcastic, just old truths finally said out loud. How much do you really know about my path? She didn't answer. When I sent the letter about being selected for the Strategic Encryption Unit, you wrote back asking if I'd be home for the holidays. No congratulations, no questions. She tucked her sleeve down, covering a wrinkle near her wrist. I didn't understand. You could have asked. I stood, not out of anger, just certainty. I tried for years, but every time I succeeded at something that didn't fit your expectations. You all looked the other way. She nodded slowly, like someone who'd rehearsed that moment over and over. I want you to stay one more day. I tilted my head. Why? She met my gaze. There's a small internal recognition ceremony tomorrow at Whitman Cole. They want to thank the military representative who supported the project. Rachel called early this morning and asked if you'd attend. Officially. I let out a slow breath. My audit's complete. That's their internal matter now. She stepped closer, lightly touching my arm. You came home. Without hesitation. I want you to be there. I held her gaze for a long moment. All right. That afternoon, I didn't return to base. Instead, I stopped by Olivia's place. She lived on the third floor of a brick walk-up near the train station. When I arrived, her daughter was coloring on the floor, humming softly. Olivia greeted me with a warm, quiet smile. Come in. I just made ginger mint tea. The apartment was small, cozy, books everywhere. Sunlight through cream curtains. A few green plants on the sill. I didn't think they'd invite you to this ceremony, she said, handing me a cup. But I'm not surprised you agreed. I shrugged. Maybe they're changing, or maybe it's just for show. She sat beside her daughter, brushed hair from her face. Whatever the reason, if you show up, they can't pretend anymore that they didn't know. I watched the child quietly drawing, her left hand smudged with ink. I don't need their recognition anymore. I said. "But I need to end this on my terms." Olivia nodded. "Then wear something sharp tomorrow," she said, smiling, "and don't forget lipstick." I laughed, a real laugh. I didn't know what they'd call me tomorrow, but I knew exactly who I'd be when I walked into that room. The recognition ceremony was held in a 6th-floor conference room at Whitman Cole headquarters, right beside the Next-Gen Security Systems exhibit. The space was immaculate. Rows of chairs perfectly aligned, each seat with a printed program and a small bottle of water. I arrived on time. Wearing my midnight blue formal dress uniform, my hair pinned tightly, my shoes polished to a clean shine. I didn't sit in the front. I chose a side seat, close enough to hear, far enough to observe. My father stood at the podium, dressed in a dark gray suit. His voice was steady through the microphone. "We are honored to have partnered with the Department of Defense on a project of national importance. Everyone here today represents the strength of public-private collaboration." When he mentioned military support, he glanced briefly toward me. His voice dipped, just for a second, then returned to form. The man next to me, likely the chief engineer, leaned over and whispered, "You're Colonel Stevens, right? It's a pleasure to finally meet you. I've heard a lot." I gave a quick handshake and polite smile. When CEO Rachel Monroe stepped onto the stage, her voice was clear, grounded. "None of today's progress would have been possible without the oversight and leadership from our military counterpart. Colonel Maya Stevens didn't just audit the system, she set the benchmark." The room turned to look at me. I gave a small nod. Didn't stand, didn't speak, didn't need to. After the ceremony, I stepped into the back hallway, leaning against a steel column overlooking the parking lot. The quiet felt earned. Then I heard footsteps. My mother appeared beside me, wrapped in a pale blue wool coat, clutching a small purse. Her expression was conflicted. "Didn't that feel awkward?" she asked softly. "Everyone looking at you like that?" I turned toward her. "No," I said calmly. "It felt right." She pressed her lips together. She didn't argue. Maybe she hadn't fully processed it. Maybe she was still sifting through conversations we never had. That's when I saw Daniel walking quickly toward us. His face was tight with concern. He held out a tablet. "You need to see this." I glanced at the screen, then a second time, slower. "Internal access logs." "What am I looking at?" I asked. He lowered his voice. "There was an unauthorized access to the monitoring system during the final testing. It wasn't military. It came from the engineering team, but they don't have level 2 clearance." My brow furrowed. "Whose credentials?" He showed me the name. It was the same person who'd pushed back during our first project meeting, the UI lead, a close friend of my father's. I exhaled. "Looks like this ceremony was perfectly timed." If you've ever been dismissed, ignored, or doubted for speaking up, share this story. Someone out there needs it. I called Rachel directly. "I need an emergency meeting in 2 hours. Tech security, legal, and data oversight, all departments." She didn't ask why. "I'll make it happen." Daniel still stood beside me, holding the tablet. "You're sure about the data?" He nodded. "I traced it through 3 different log layers. They tried to scrub it, but not fast enough." I touched his shoulder gently. It worked. He smiled, small but proud. 2 hours later, I sat at the head of a large conference table. On the screen behind me was the full access path, timestamps, breach depth, user ID. The name was clear. Adam Blake, UI lead. He was in the room, hands clenched, eyes dark. I pointed to the chart. "You weren't authorized for this level of access. And copying military data onto a personal workstation is a direct violation of Clause 4 in our interagency agreement." I just wanted to test compatibility," he stammered. It wasn't malicious. Rachel's voice was ice. "Running unsanctioned access without documentation compromises the entire security chain. You know this." The room was silent, dense, like pressure before glass shatters. I set down my pen. "We'll be documenting this." Further review will proceed through military intelligence. Your access is revoked, effective immediately. Adam stood so quickly he nearly knocked over the chair, then left the room without another word. Rachel looked at me. I gave a single nod. They thought the ceremony was the end of a story, but it was only the beginning of something much larger. That night, I returned home. The house was quiet. The situation at the company was contained. For now. Adam was suspended. The report was filed with the Pentagon before midnight. Rachel had texted, "We'll take it from here." I was still in uniform when I stepped through the door. My mother looked up from the couch, a blanket over her lap, the TV playing quietly. "Did you eat?" she asked. I shook my head, pulled out a chair. My father emerged from his study, collar undone, eyes tired. He sat across from me. "We need to talk." I nodded. He started without defensiveness, without anger. "When you joined ROC, I thought you were rebelling. Trying to go your own way just to prove a point. I didn't think it would last." He met my eyes. For once, not avoiding. But I was wrong. Not because you made it, but because you never gave up. My mother sat beside him, quiet, listening. When Rachel called about the unauthorized access, she said softly, "I wasn't worried about the company. I was worried about what could have happened if you hadn't been there." I looked down at the silver ring on my finger. The light caught the curve. For the first time, I saw them worry. Not for reputation, not for image, but for me. "We weren't raised to show things," my father said. "Maybe that's why we didn't know how to show you we were proud." He paused. "If you're willing, we'd like to start over." I smiled gently. "I can stay a few more days, but base is still home." My mom let out a quiet breath. It wasn't regret. It was understanding. The next day, Daniel texted, "Can we talk?" We met at a tea shop near Green Lake. He wore a hoodie, hair messy. "Do you remember when you taught me the military alphabet in 8th grade?" he asked. "I used it to write notes to a girl. She thought I was writing in German." I laughed. "Yeah, you were terrible at hiding your crush." He smiled. "Back then, I thought you were weird. But later, I realized you were building a system. A way to survive when no one else understood what you were thinking." He looked at me directly. "If you hadn't been in that room, I wouldn't have had the courage to report the breach. I probably would have let it slide." I didn't speak, just listened. "Thank you. For that, and for all the years before. You kept calling, even when no one picked up." I looked down at my tea. "I thought about stopping," I admitted. He nodded. "I'm glad you didn't." When I got home, rain had started, a steady rhythm against the windows. I made cocoa. My mother sat on the kitchen couch. I knew the past couldn't be undone. But I had finally rerouted its path towards something honest. My phone buzzed from General Amanda Reyes, subject, new role, pending clearance. I read every word, then stood still, hand resting on the back of a chair. This wasn't just a job offer. It was a turning point. I replied with 3 lines. "Thank you for your trust. I'm ready to discuss the role further once clearance is confirmed." It took me over an hour to write those lines. Not because I was unsure, but because I knew this would change everything. That night we had a simple dinner, carrots cut into flower shapes like when I was little. My dad had made the sauce himself. Daniel talked about re-auditing his team's entire system after the breach, calm, like it was just another task. My parents listened, no interruptions, no dismissive smiles. When I finished my last bite, my dad set his fork down. "I saw a message from someone named Reyes on the office line today." I looked up. "She's a senior officer at Fort Ralston," I said. My mother sat up straighter. "Is that where you'll be going?" "Maybe, if clearance is approved." My father stared into his wine glass. "So you won't be coming back often?" I nodded. "The role is long-term, high level. I'll be shaping national defense training strategy." Daniel folded his napkin. "Sounds bigger than WC." Different, I said, but the impact, much bigger. My mom placed both hands on the table. Are you sure? She asked. I mean, are you okay with going that far away again? I smiled gently. I've waited years for someone to ask me that. And now that you have, yes, I'm okay.